Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, and thank you for joining us today for our webinar on reducing contract cheating, international opportunities for action. My name is Gretchen Hansen. I am a Senior Product Marketing Manager at Turnitin, and I am so thrilled to be joined today by my two prestigious colleagues, Dr. Thomas Lancaster and Dr. Irene Glendinning. They are going to be sharing with you some really great insights into contract cheating and some things that we can do to combat that. All as part of the effort to support the International Day of Action, which is October 16th. So more to come about that. To get us started, I wanted to provide a few housekeeping notes. This session is being recorded, so you will be receiving a copy of that recording after the webinar today. Also, if you have questions during the session, we would love to receive them. In your side panel, you will notice that there is a chat area. You can choose to chat us there. Any questions that you might have, we'd be happy to answer them. So please go ahead and say hello. Let us know you're here. We'd love to say hi to you and answer any questions that you have. So thank you for joining us today. I'm really excited to get this webinar started. And so with that, let me go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Thomas Lancaster. Thomas, over to you.
All right, hello everyone, and thanks for joining us today, regardless where in the world you are. Got lots of people on the webinar, and really you've got Irene and I are with you to talk about contract cheating, talk about many of the challenges in the field, but more importantly, the opportunities there are for us as an educational sector to take action. And that's the us, not just involving staff, but also involving students and everyone involved with making sure that people really benefit from education, they learn, they go out, and they get good jobs at the end. And we'll tell you a bit more later on about the 4th International Day of Action Against Contract Cheating, which is on the 16th of October 2019. I know there are people here from institutions that have already signed up and who have taken part in that day before. So we're really keen for you to share your ideas and experience as well as we go through. But first of all, if you've not met me before, and I know many of you have, then I've been working in the academic integrity field for it's my 20th year. 2000, I started my PhD. I work in the Department of Computing at Imperial College London. My interest is teaching and learning. And for my sins, I'm often listed as the inventor of contract cheating, which of course doesn't mean I was the first person to do it, but the person who came up with the term and has spoken and written quite extensively about that since, most of it with my now retired colleague Robert Clark. So for me, it's really important we get the message out to students that we don't want you to contract cheat. This is what you should do instead, and this is why we think it's important for you to do your own work. We've also got Dr. Irene Glendinning on the line. Irene, hi.
Hi, yes, and my research has been a little bit broader than Thomas's because I've looked at different aspects of academic integrity, started looking at plagiarism, and more recently I've been very interested in the challenges, shall we say, of contract cheating and what we can do about those. So I'm going to hand over to Thomas to do the first part of the presentation. I'll be talking to you later on.
Yeah, so as you can tell, Irene and I aren't in the same room, but we have worked together quite a lot over the last few years. We both worked together at Coventry University for a while, and we've been involved in many of the same research projects as well, and different areas related to that. So Irene is travels around the world all the time doing work in academic integrity, including as her role as Vice President of the European Network for Academic Integrity, one of the two major networks working in this field. So why are we all here? First of all, I think it's to share our concerns about contract cheating, to think about why it's such a problem now. It's not a new problem, but why we think it's more of a problem. We're taking action. As I mentioned, we've got the 4th International Day of Action Against Contract Cheating coming up on the 16th of October of this year, and we're going to think about some of the things you can do to make that day and that event a success. But I'm going to assume that people are here because you've heard about contract cheating, you've probably been involved with it, you've probably run events yourself, or you may have been to events, you may have heard about it before. So just a very quick, rough definition of contract cheating. We're really thinking about the case where a student isn't the one doing their work, but there's a third party involved who is. And the student is then taking the work done by somebody else, and they're using that to get their degree or to get their academic qualification. And there's a little bit of discussion about where contract cheating ends, where other forms of academic misconduct begin, and whether if a student asks for the work, gets it, but doesn't hand it in, is that an offence? But we'll lump all of those sort of activities together for this. But there are all kinds of ways a student can use to get this work done. It can be going online and finding an essay mill. It can be responding to all the adverts that a student sees nowadays, whether it's flyers being given out on campus or business cards, or other students talking about somebody they know, whether it's going through a tutorial company, because there's a thin line quite often between when tutoring ends and cheating begins. And it can even be these methods that have been in place for many, many years, such as a student's family member helping them out because they have a vested interest in making sure that their student doesn't fail. And we've had examples recently of graduates from a course then going on and finding people still on the course saying, I've done this course, I know how to get a good mark, can I help you? And there's this thin line between help and the way it's phrased to students and this market that the companies are capitalizing on and when contract cheating begins. So question for you to think about, and feel free to type your ideas in the chat box, which you see on your screen. What's the impact of a single student contract cheating? What does that mean? And give it a little bit of time to type that in. Hopefully the chats will come through if everyone's awake today. What are we thinking about there? And I'm not seeing much coming through. Now, I can't tell if that's because I can't see the messages, or because you're just wanting my insight into that question for that. But I'm sure you straight away, like I do, you think if a student cheats, then they have not done the learning that we expect of them for that. So, yeah, so Gretchen, I can't see a questions panel there. Just mention that to our organizer. I can only see a chat panel.
I can read a few of the ones that have just come in. We've gotten some good.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So what do we think?
Say they don't learn the material themselves, or undermining academic and professional standards, not getting the education she or he needs. Quick query. Oh, that's the chat. Qualifications being sent out under false pretenses. The qualification loses value. They get an award that they don't deserve. And if they're a nurse, I need to worry. It's also not fair to other students. Compromises the integrity of all stakeholders.
Yeah, I think that's a very good summary of the type of things that I put on my slide as well. And there are so many disadvantages about this. The student themselves doesn't learn, and of course, one of the problems with this is if they miss out in learning in the early stages of a course, then how do they cope with the harder stages, apart from going back to the same services to contract cheat again and again and again? And that's when the services and providers have a hook on the students there. That it's really disadvantaging the honest students. And when I talk to students, of course, the vast majority of whom are completely honest, that's the message I get back from them all the time, that they feel offended that other students are cheating on their course. They're the ones doing all the work, but the other students are ending up with the same qualification as them at the end. Of course, I'd like to think that we find some of those students who are breaching academic integrity along the way. But yeah, the end result of this is we get students who are going into jobs that they shouldn't be in. We get employers who are dissatisfied with the quality of students, and we get people who are worried about whether the educational system is fit for purpose. So just sort of thinking points that you often hear somebody saying, well, the only person they're cheating is themselves, but these students are cheating far more people than that. And I guess I won't send this out as an audience question, but does contract cheating represent one student? Is only one student cheating at any one time? And I mean, the answer, quite frankly, is no. We know that we can see contract cheating on every course. We know we can see it in every subject. I've got a whole database of examples I've collected over the years, but it's very easy to find now essay mills specializing in different academic disciplines. I'm not going to throw out headline figures. You'll have seen some of these in the media, often slightly misinterpreting the evidence that's been out there in front of them with the kind of numbers going ahead. But what I can say is the numbers vary between discipline to discipline. They vary from institution to institution. And so much of this is down to the institutional ethos which a student is operating under. And so that's why I think every institution needs to think about its own type of students and where the challenges are for that particular group. Where are they likely to fall foul of temptation and go ahead and use these third-party services that they shouldn't be using? But we know quite often it's several students, and that students do talk to one another. If a student cheats and gets away with it, they will tell their friends, just like in all other walks of life there. And the reality is that cheating happens all the time. Here is an example from a Facebook group, just of a student saying their novel way they had to cheat, which was to conceal their notes, as you can see on the image. And so many ways that people have always cheated in exams. This is nothing new, that people will take shortcuts if we make those shortcuts available to them and they don't see the value of avoiding them. So we can be sure that every institution has contract cheating happening somewhere. Now, there are some brilliant examples around the sector of where institutions have really taken the bull by the horns, and they've spoken to their staff, they've spoken to their students, they've actively looked for students for outsourcing and thought about redeveloping their assessment. There are many institutions who are just coming around to the fact that this is a problem out there. And there are still staff I speak to all the time who say things like, I had no idea that students could do this. They've been completely missed all the media for the past 10, 15 years about this and the wider changes to society. But I can say that every student I speak to knows these things happen. They see adverts appearing on their Facebook group or on their Instagram page or in Snapchat now telling them. They see the people stood outside the gates of universities or on university campuses giving out their business cards with a 20% off if you order today type discount at the start of the year. So it's not something we should be worried about talking about. We're not going to tell students about something they didn't know was happening there. We're just going to be helping to educate them about why this isn't a good idea without preaching to them too much. And the big change we're seeing now is the growth of this industry. That I was talking to a colleague earlier this morning as we were setting up for the webinar, who was saying, well, it's an arms race, and it's not really a term I like to use, but it's a term that keeps appearing everywhere. And he thought he'd thought of that term. So this kind of subconscious plagiarism, but it really is something of an arms race there. As we put changes into place, the contract cheating industry itself puts its changes into place. It tries to find new ways to connect with students there, because it has a vested interest in getting as many orders as possible through its system, and a vested interest in getting a student to hand over their mobile phone number or their email address, because once a company has that information, they can market to that same student again and again and again until that student clicks and they find themselves under a lot of pressure and they buy from that company that time. Yeah. And it's a stage that people just joke about this. The kind of discussion you see, like the one on the slide. I run an essay mill, make $10,000 a month working part-time, don't have to work a real job. College professors hate this weird trick. And there are sites out there which will tell you how to set up an essay mill. You can buy the templates that are ready-made to do this. You can plug into existing software which will help you connect with writers there. And people sell this online as a make money online opportunity. Your latest get rich quick scheme there. It's not peddling some kind of weird pill to people anymore. It's selling essays. Yeah. And the industry has got really sophisticated. This is an advert from a heavily advertising service, which you may have heard about, EduBirdie. There's quite a lot of them out there. Trying to recruit a student or a recent graduate whose job is to go and travel around campuses and to spring break spots, to party with students, and to share information about EduBirdie's services at the same time. It's a kind of thing that has been around for years, called a brand ambassador, in the same way that different firms will have student brand ambassadors to promote their fast food service or to encourage them to become a customer of that bank. Essay mills and contract cheating services have these brand ambassadors now as well, and they're presenting this as a fun thing to do, actively getting students to promote these contract cheating services to other students there with outrageous college events. If you are many in the States, you do get to go along to one of these outrageous college events, do report back and say how much you got to drink and what other the fun tasks were, what kind of discount could you win off your essay by playing the games really well. But the way this industry is getting in contact with our students is something we have to be really concerned about. In talks, I go through so many examples of this. We've only got a relatively short time period. Black Friday used to peddle discounts. Students now know about this as an example of somebody on Twitter asking for a discount. But last year, Black Friday, there were no shortage of different discount offers appearing. They appear all the time, but there was one of them from 3 different essay companies there: Foxy Essay, Stormtrooper Essay, Rocket Essay. Now, of course, you'll quickly look at that and say, well, they're all the same advert, because probably deep down, they're all exactly the same service. But students don't know that. They look at that and think, oh, I think Stormtroopers sound cool. I'll go ahead and buy from that particular company. But they've got all the standard things, the discount code. The only one this particular one doesn't have on is the words plagiarism free, which is heavily pushed all the time by these companies, because why are you buying work? So you don't get caught by originality checking software, because you're paying somebody to do something where the words are new and original for that. I gave a talk in Canada as a feature presentation a few months ago, and Mel Hamilton did a great sketch note of it, but you can see the whole set of slides on my SlideShare account for that. But just some of the social media type tactics these firms are using to connect with students. It's even getting to the stage where they're setting up fake welcome groups at universities to befriend students, looking as if they're part of a particular institution. But a few weeks in, when they talk to the student says, well, oh, I'm finding it hard being away from home. I've got all these deadlines. Then they're coming across as a friend saying, well, I've used this service. They're really good. Why don't you use them too? I'll put you in contact with them. And so it's incredibly sophisticated, deceptive industry that students are falling foul of for many different reasons. So I've already answered a few of these questions, but I'll throw this open to the question window again for Gretchen to share some of the answers. But why do students end up contract cheating? And of course, there are all kinds of different reasons, but what's our strength of feeling across the group? Give you another few seconds to type some ideas in. And of course, there's no wrong answer for any of these. So Gretchen, what do we have?
We're still waiting for a couple of things to be written in, so I'm sure people are typing away.
Yeah, that's great. And
and
I think the bit I just want to say then while it's being typed in is that I don't think it's because students are inherently bad and they're evil people and they just want to get one over on the university system. Perhaps very occasionally, but I think there are all kinds of other reasons out there. So Gretchen, over to you.
Yeah, so lots of comments about time pressure, desperation, time management skills, panic, language issues, fear of letting parents down, More here. Fear and lack of confidence about ability, deadline pressures, feelings of insecurity, bad time management, inexperience with formats and not being quite prepared to take the risks. One comment about I had a student who said that in his country, Syria, there was no copyright law, so it was okay for him to copy someone's exercise. Oh my. Yeah, and just more about time, running out of time, and being ill-prepared.
Yeah, and I think you've, again, some great crowdsourcing of answers, picked up many of the same answers as I have, and it really is a how long is a piece of string type question here, but so many students are underprepared. Irene and I did a project in Southeast Europe looking at this, and students there were saying very much it was that they didn't have the academic writing skills, and they didn't know, and everyone assumed they knew all this stuff. There's certainly some of the teaching and preparation we can do for that, but we get the students who fall for the marketing, or they think there's no other choice about this. We often have students who feel that there's an introduction to academic integrity online course, and that's just a hurdle they have to jump over and try and get your 75% right in the multiple choice quiz and you're done. And it's not something that's picked up again and again in their course. I think there was the idea I picked up on earlier on, which is that the students who cheat once, then they end up in a bad situation. They keep having to resort to using these services because they've missed some core skills in their particular field there. And sometimes it's just they don't think the work is of any value to them. They think it looks so easy. They say, well, I can do it, but my time is better spent working on other areas. So there's all kinds of pressure going through with all of that. So it's quite a challenging reasons as to why students end up on this slippery slope, but they're ones that we can tap into by having events like the one we're going to talk about. And so we really do need to be having fairly open discussions about academic integrity and contract cheating with students, about having that kind of understanding view that we know these things happen there. But to me, one of the biggest successes I've seen around the sector in the last few years has been bringing students in as our partners of academic integrity as well. So the students who feel strongly about this, the student unions or the other support groups that work with students, getting them on board and really looking at this as an activity that we can all be involved with and that we can all be proud of. So at this point, really going to be I've sort of mentioned the 4th International Day of Action Against Contract Cheating is coming up, encouraging everyone to be involved and to share your activity and what you do. It is a community effort, but I think I'm ready to pass over to Irene, but Gretchen, any thoughts or comments that we should pick up on before we do that?
No, I think we're all caught up.
I think it's worth,
so Irene?
I think it's worth mentioning an interesting comment that somebody's made here. Why don't we organise an International Day of Action in what would be our spring, in March, April, for the Southern Hemisphere? And I think a lot of us have starting points in January anyway, so I think that would be great to do that. So perhaps we ought to have an International Day of Action at least twice a year, and then everyone can benefit from that. Well,
yeah, brilliant idea. And I see that question as well. The only bit haven't been seeing is sort of the comments coming through, but yes, we've worked around that, but just interesting. But yeah, Irene, then the floor is yours. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Well, as you can see, this is going to be the 4th International Day of Action. So we started off way back in 2016 with the first International Day of Action. And I mean, the point I want to make is that if you don't want to have an International Day of Action against contract cheating, if you'd rather have an International Day of Action on academic integrity or spin it positively, absolutely no reason why not. It does coincide with the Global Day of Ethics, so it's perfectly okay. You can call it whatever you like. But the point of this day or this week, if you want to actually spread it across a week, then the whole point of this day is you're raising the issues within your academic community. It gives an opportunity to have discussions with colleagues with academic staff, with your administrative staff as well, anyone who is in any way interested and involved in this kind of process. But most importantly, it's a really good opportunity at the start of the academic year for those of us in the Northern Hemisphere to engage with our students and get the students to help to run some events. So I really see it as a great opportunity for students to get involved. Now, I've got some pictures later on in the PowerPoint that you can have a look at of previous events. So it's great if you can get the students to actually propose themselves what they'd like to do, because they're more likely to get involved, and they're more likely to get the students involved. And we've found it's actually quite easy to get students involved in this once you explain what it's all about. And they will get the message over as powerful, much more powerfully than you can. There also, this year, there is a competition, and the competition is for a poster. So to actually design a poster, and there are some really great prizes offered by the International Centre for Academic Integrity. That will be launched very soon. I'm not sure why it was delayed. We should have launched it in July, but hopefully we'll get the message out very soon, and then people can start to work with students as soon as they arrive in September or whenever it is on their interest to that. So the ICAI has put up some funding for prizes for that competition. But you can actually run your own competition if you prefer. So the previous events, I think the last event we had something like 88 institutions signed up. I'm sure there were more institutions involved in it that didn't actually sign up. But it's great if you can actually, so I know some of you who are involved in the presentation today have already signed up, but if you haven't done so, sign your institution up and start to get your institution mobilized. Particularly, you might need a little bit of funding to give out prizes or goodies, giveaways and things like that. You might want to develop some resources. So it's a good opportunity now just to ask for that funding and get that in line and start to prepare for the event and get people all mobilized to get prepared. Next slide, please, Thomas. So most of these we've said already, but these are the messages that we want you to try and get out to your students through the day of action or through the activities that you hold within that week or that day, depending on how you decide to do it. Certainly, contract cheating devalues education. It reduces the quality and the standards of education if it's allowed to go unchallenged. I think it's really important that we all take a very, very strong stand on that. For the students themselves, we've already said it bypasses learning. So they're paying good fees in most countries of the world. They're paying a lot of money for their learning, and they're wasting that funding. But also they're not going to develop personally by cheating the system and by getting somebody else to do the work for them. We've said this already in Thomas's part. It's unfair to other students, and that also came up in your feedback. In most institutions, if not all institutions, it's certainly against the regulations. And if your regulations don't stipulate that it's against the regulations, then they should do. It's already illegal, as we know, in some countries and in states, and some countries such as the UK are looking at it, but we haven't gone quite as far as putting it into law. I know Australia and Ireland are working on the legislation, but it's actually a very tricky thing to legislate against because we're not really interested, well, certainly I'm not interested, perhaps you are, be interested to know your feedback on this, but I'm not interested in criminalising students. I'm not particularly interested in criminalising their parents either. I'd rather we got the message out and we stop students from doing it and we disrupt this terrible industry that's going on. But we also need to get over the message that it's also just as bad for students to get other students to do their work for them and get and perhaps get their parents or friends or anyone else to do the work, ex-students, etc., to do the work for them. So next message we need to get out is if they haven't got the skills, they're not going to be able to progress on their career, and they're not going to be able to succeed in their career. So, you know, I don't see any value to students in spending all that money on their fees if they're not going to take advantage of the opportunities they've got. They also may, in some situations, they're going to deprive other students that are more serious about studying of the opportunity to learn. Now, the next one about blackmail, we have come across specific cases of blackmail where students have been blackmailed while they're being students. But even if they're not blackmailed while they are a student, these companies and these ghostwriters have got the personal information belonging to those students, and that blackmail could happen at any time in their future. So it's a ticking time bomb. It could happen at any time. It could happen later in their career. As we know, it sort of happened when various politicians and other public figures have been exposed for plagiarism and so on. So that blackmail isn't necessarily now, but it could happen in the future. Their personal information, as we've found from some recent research by Wendy Sutherland-Smith and her colleague, that the terms and conditions on a lot of the essay mail sites do not exclude the reuse of that personal information by the essay mails and the ghostwriters. So who knows what might happen to that personal information in the future. So it's a really worrying situation. I mean, would you really want to give your personal information out to someone who is in a rather dodgy industry in the first place? So the message is, don't be tempted to do it for all of those reasons, and I'm sure many more reasons that you can come up with yourself. Okay, next slide, please, Thomas. So here's a picture of some of my own colleagues, and this just goes to show the diversity of people who are interested in this topic. So we've got our Centre for Academic Writing that were involved. You can see half of their banner there. They are very interested in this topic, and they're very actively involved in trying to dissuade students from any form of cheating. We've got our subject librarians there, and we borrowed this spinning wheel here that the young lady's holding up. And we borrowed that from Deakin University, who have now updated the categories on theirs to take into account some of the research they've done. So that's quite a nice thing that you could do, is get the students to spin the wheel and see what their outcomes would be. But we've also got the students involved there from our Students' Union, and they were asking students asking other students that came to the stand to do the challenge, where they and then to post that onto Twitter using the two hashtags. So what is your take on why students shouldn't be involved in contract cheating? So ban essay mails is one of them. I can't read the other one. And we've got some more of those coming up on the next slide. So next slide, please, Thomas. So this is a group from Nottingham-Trent. I think that was 2017, with my colleague right in the middle, Shiva. I don't know whether you know Shiva, but it's him and his students, and they've each got their pledges that they've written themselves and they're holding up. Again, I can't read, the writing's a bit too small, but that's a very, very simple activity you can do with students to get them to what does academic integrity mean to you, and why should we outlaw contract cheating? Why should we stop what the students doing? Raise the awareness. And it's surprising how many students, when you start to talk to them, will tell you of examples that they've come across themselves, and why they really hate the fact that other students are cheating. Next slide, please. So what you can do to participate in the event. So what I'd like you to do, first of all, if you haven't done so already, is to sign up your institution or sign up yourself. It doesn't oblige you to do anything. It doesn't commit you to any particular activity, but just showing your support for the event is a good thing to do. So sign up as official participants, and the link is on the slides, which I think we'll probably make available to you if Thomas agrees. Start planning well ahead, so that anything that you need. So for example, one year we developed a video for students that we that we made available to them. The Students' Union did that during the summer, and then it was ready for the autumn, specifically about our own institution, so that you know, the students can relate to that. Contact colleagues and ask them to do things with their students, and also particularly student societies, where raise the awareness and get them to participate and to help to organise different events. You can get different parts of the university or the institution to organise different kind of events, and it could be that the events are training for staff, training for students. It could be fun events where students are asked to do something, asked to create something. It could be very creative. But whatever it is, whatever day suits you during the week, but particularly try and organise something during that day, because you can actually watch what's happening in different parts of the world on that day. That's quite fun, particularly following the Twitter feeds and the social media, creating new posters, leaflets, and so on. The other thing that we had quite a lot of success with, and you can do locally, is to contact the local media or the press and arrange for publicity for the event, particularly if you can manage to find some tame journalists who are not going to use it as an opportunity to try and denigrate the institution for doing this kind of thing. So you need to find journalists who are sympathetic to what we're trying to do. We're not, it's not all about students cheating, it's about trying to stop students cheating, it's trying to help students to value their learning and so on. So contacting local media is quite good, and arranging publicity and showing that what you're doing, and getting the students to help you with that as well. Okay, next slide, please. So here is an example of where we had, and this is going back a little bit to 2016, where we had some negative publicity. City's top of paid essay lists. Okay, so we had some negative publicity about the number of cases that we had after a Freedom of Information request. That's a publicity that actually might damage your institution. And so that's the kind of publicity you want to avoid. But on the other hand, if you look at the one on the left, you'll see that this is more the kind of publicity that we would like to have. So to show that we're actually taking this seriously, we're doing something about it. It's an international problem. It's not just our institution, and that everything that we can do, we're trying to do to dissuade students from doing it, particularly working with students to try and disrupt the problem and persuade students that learning is important. Okay, next slide. So what I recommend that you try to do is to get the whole of your institution involved. You could arrange for guest speakers. You could have a big event in your institution. Try and make it as fun as possible, but you've really got to bring over the seriousness of it. It's not a joke, it's, you know, but you can actually make it fun. But the fact that you actually get people talking about it is important, and realizing that it's up front there. We know all about it, and we know what the consequences are, and make sure that students are aware of the fact that we are getting better at catching it, and we'd really rather they didn't get involved in it in the first place. Here I've put on the slide here that run workshops for students that are helping them to understand what the problems are, and you can make it much broader. It's not just about contract cheating, it's about all other forms of cheating, and it's about what we mean by academic integrity. It's about academic writing, if you want to spin it that way. But also it's important for colleagues to different parts of the university. And we had a meeting recently in the Midlands, and the diversity of different sorts of people that are interested in this topic cuts across the whole of the institution. So it's not just about academic staff, it's about people involved in the process of listening to the cases of the students, supporting the students, particularly students' union representatives. So lots of people are interested in this topic and want to help and want to try and reduce it. But you can ask teaching staff within their teaching that week to focus on academic integrity and how it applies within their own disciplines, within their own teaching. So that's actually quite an important thing to do, so that the students they come across it in lots of different contexts, and there is no doubt in the student's mind that we're taking it seriously. I think that's really the message we want to get over. Okay, next slide. So on the day itself, you can ask the students to write their own statements about why they think contract cheating is wrong. Now, what we did a couple of years ago, our Students' Union produced some paper bricks, and we built a whole wall with, on each brick, there was a statement from a student on what they thought academic integrity meant. So we built a wall of integrity, and that was all stuck onto a glass partition. And that was quite an effective way to show what integrity was and to get students to think about it. We also use these small whiteboards, so we have the kind of what we call the whiteboard challenge, and that's quite an easy thing to do. If you don't have any whiteboards, you can just use pieces of paper, that's fine. What we like to students love taking pictures of themselves, so upload a photograph with their statement onto social media, whatever medium you wish. Certainly the hashtags defeat the cheat, or if you prefer to spin it positively, use Excel with integrity. Both of those are available. We deliberately chose a negative and a positive one, and those hashtags originally were chosen by students, not by us. But it's great to follow the tweets that are coming in and the posts that are coming up from all over the world during the day, starting with Australia and New Zealand in the morning, and then ending with the west coast of America and presumably Hawaii right at the very extreme of the day. So it's a full day, a great fun day. But also, if that day isn't suitable for you, any other day of that week on nearby is fine. And again, as I said, if you don't want it to call it contract cheating, if you want to have it really positively spun, then call it a day of ethics or whatever title suits you. The important thing is that you do something round about that day or on that day that gets the message home to students and colleagues that it's something that you take very seriously as an institution, and you are actively dissuading students from bad behaviour, and you're persuading students to act with integrity. That's the message we want to get out. Okay, next slide. I think we're very near the end now. So there's a few more of these whiteboard challenges here with some messages. And I can't remember where these came from, but they are quite interesting messages, and we were told we could use them, where the students have actually taken a nice picture of themselves and posted it online. So all female and all attractive as well. So a little bit, I couldn't get any pictures of male students. I couldn't find anyone who was looking. Okay, so just to give you an idea of what the way it works, and students are happy to do that kind of thing, and to think about their own integrity when they're doing it. Okay, next slide. Okay, so now we're interested, now you've listened to what we have to say, we're interested in what your ideas are. Have you got any more ideas you want to share with other participants in the webinar for the kinds of things you'd like to do on that day, or anything you've got planned, or anything you think is a good idea? So type in there, and we're relying on Gretchen to help us with the to feed those ideas back so that everyone can hear about them.
While folks are typing, we did have a couple of questions come in that might take a minute to answer. It really struck a chord with comments around the legality or illegality. So 2 questions. What legal mechanisms can be used to stop such businesses? Is it possible to do contract cheating illegal, and what regulations could help here? And then a second similar comment, as most contract cheating companies aren't even in the UK, would you only be criminalizing students by making it illegal? Maybe we could talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, very, very, very good question. Thomas, do you want to come back in on these as well and have your 2 pence here?
Well, I mean, all these law questions are really tough to answer because law differs completely all around the world. But there are, as Irene said, several countries that are going down this route, particularly Australia at the moment. And there's a lot of discussion about their plans to make contract cheating illegal, and as to whether that could criminalize, say, a parent who was helping their children with the homework. I use helping in the term where they may be doing a bit too much, but not to the extent that their children would want their parents to end up in jail because of it. So there are law experts out there, and I can't claim to be one, but one of the things I would like to see is to make the advertising of these sites and services illegal, because I think that really gets to the core of the people who are doing the work for the students, or indeed the companies who are making a lot of money by sort of brokering this connection between students and their writers. And they're the ones who really make it a challenge when they are the ones on a campus. And you just wonder, how did they manage to get their information into the library when it's meant to be closed off and only for students? Perhaps they had a student to help them out. So to me, I think that's where we can hit them, is the marketing and the advertising, stop them being able to put prominent ads on social media and other sites. But I completely agree. I think the legal approach is one of only many approaches we need to take. And I'm much more interested in the one we're looking at today, which is the opportunities to work with students. And I mean, I guess there's so many things Irene has said. I'm sure you're typing in some brilliant ideas, but the power of the International Day of Action Against Contract Cheating to me is you can get great visibility about this on campus and get everyone on board, but you can also tie into all the activity going on around the world. So you see the social media streams going in. I mean, if you just look back to last year's discussions, and I was sort of following them apart from brief hours I went to sleep, from when the first people started out in Australia, New Zealand, right up to the end of the day in North America and beyond. There is that continual activity. Students really like sharing now on social media. Many of them are very happy to have their photo on there. Not everyone will take part, but also the other power is getting students to come up with great ideas. And there are so many of them. We could have showed you one of my favorite ones, which has been done now by a few institutions, has been a great graffiti wall where students write on that wall, or they spray paint on that wall about their messages to do with integrity. And that's also a great visual, and it gets students feeling, well, we're actually allowed to do graffiti on campus. So there's so many ways to ask them, what are your ideas for getting involved here?
Can I come in here about the legal side of it? I've always been a great supporter of the idea of legislation. Not everyone agreed, but I think it's important. It's unlikely we will prosecute that many companies. Certainly in New Zealand, I think it's true that there has been one case, but actually it was settled out of court. But the company was prosecuted and shut down, but they'll probably set up somewhere else. So yes, yeah, there are issues. There are issues, as somebody quite rightly said, the fact that we can't prosecute companies that are not within our legislative domain, so overseas companies. And in fact, one of the justification from the UKSA's chat was if you shut down a respectable SA mill like us, you'll just drive people offshore. So that was his rather perverse kind of argument that he tried to persuade us with. But what the legislation will do, if we have legislation, is it will allow us to say to students, these companies are illegal, because at the moment they're not illegal. These companies are perfectly legitimate, and they're perfectly able to set up and run as businesses. And as Thomas says, they're perfectly able to ask other people to provide services for them, like marketing and printing and all of the other kinds of things. If these companies are illegal, then working with these companies should also be illegal. And we are in a strong position to say to students, don't use these services, they are illegal. And so it sends a strong message to students that the government has seen fit to enact legislation and to stop these companies operating within our national borders. And so it sends a strong message. So it will help with that deterrence, I hope. But it certainly won't close them down. It certainly won't, you know, it certainly won't stop them operating. And we don't know whether we've got any SA mills signed up to listen to us today. It's possible. So hopefully the message will go to you as well.
Great. So we've had some really great ideas come in. So one idea is to get teaching staff and students together to write their pledges on a whiteboard and then take a picture together. Another really interesting and exciting one is we have a writing teacher who is developing an escape room about writing and another one about plagiarism. That sounds really exciting. I'd love to learn more about that. Someone else is looking for ideas, so hopefully we're able to be providing those, coming with lots of good information. Another idea was to have an activity where the students could spot the cheat with sample contract cheated essays to see if it's possible for them to detect them with or without computers. That might be interesting. And then a shared training webinar similar to this that we can ask students and staff to join in on as an activity for IDOA. So lots of interesting takes on this, really, really exciting. We've had a couple other questions come in, mostly around plagiarism and just kind of thoughts around is online literacy software cheating? Things like Grammarly or Studiosity, they're not the same things as contract cheating. So kind of a little bit of a gray line around that looking for a little clarification on.
Yeah, there's been quite a lot of discussion on use of other tools. So kind of paraphrasing tools are particularly problematic because paraphrasing tools can be used by students to try and avoid detection by Turnitin, as we know. And I think I haven't personally used any for a while. They used to be pretty rubbish because the paraphrasing was quite awful, but I think they're getting better now. So those are worrying. But in terms of Grammarly and sort of grammar checkers and things like that, and proofreading, we've had quite a lot of discussion on that. Certainly in the UK, we've talked about proofreading. And institutions should have some kind of a policy on what is permitted, what is allowed in terms of assistance for students. And that should be strictly adhered to by the academic staff, but also by the students. They should understand what's allowed. And because actually, if you think about it, there's a continuum, starting from legitimate proofreading, which should be allowed if it's done properly. But proofreading doesn't mean editing. It just means checking for grammar, checking the actual structure of and making suggestions, making guidance to the students on how they can improve. It's not about editing the work and making the work, the content of the work better. So if you think about that extreme, which is acceptable, and then the far end of the spectrum is contract cheating, where the student gets someone else to do the whole of the work for them. But where is the borderline in between? Where is the grey area? And that is the problem between editing the student's work. When does it stop being the student's work, and when does it stop being a piece of contract cheating, or a step too far in terms of the assistance they've been getting? And the institutions should have a policy on that and should have guidance on that everyone should be aware of.
Great.
Yeah, and I mean, if I can jump in. Irene summarized all that really well, but it's not generally the tool that's the problem, it's the way in which the tool is used. But these are incredibly good discussions to have with students as well during the International Day of Action there, because there are so many grey areas and questionable areas and different approaches, and students often don't know which end of the spectrum should they be at, and why is one situation ethically acceptable and another so questionable. So they're great ideas for activities, and I love those ideas we heard about for things to do. Definitely tell me about the escape room, the things I enjoy, even though I'm not necessarily that good at them, but an escape room on contract cheating sounds a lot of fun. And also in terms of, I think Irene talked about bringing guest speakers in or getting somebody prominent in campus to talk about this. Obviously, the higher up the support within your institution, the more success you have with this type of event, because if you can show that the Vice Chancellor or President is supporting it, then there's that push all the way down, as opposed to just being another thing for them to tick off their list. But if you don't have a local speaker now, then I think I'm certainly happy, assuming the timing works out, to join a webinar for a few minutes just to kick things off, or to say something interesting or useful. And I know there are other people who are, so long as we work that around what tends to be quite a hectic 24 hours with all the, or well, more than 24 hours with the time zones, with all the activity going on around the world. So there are lots of ways to think outside the box and to get people involved remotely now, and to really again show it's that international attack on contract cheating.
Yes, absolutely. There are lots of people who you can ask. People are generally really happy to be asked, and will be more than happy to appear in a webinar if they're asked. So if you want to organise that, then please do so. It's a good idea. Some really good ideas there. Okay, we're running out of time now. I've just seen that notice there about dead on arrival. That's rather sad. So are there any more immediate questions in the last few minutes? Anyone got any questions that we can respond to?
There's no, I don't think so. I think we've answered all of the questions we've currently received. But one question, I think there's interest in following up on some of these ideas and sharing them. What would you advise for people being able to share the things that they're doing, using the hashtags or something different? What are your thoughts?
Certainly using the hashtags is a good way to share them. I'm just wondering if there's anywhere on the ICAI website where people can put some chat in there and share it through that means. We'll have a look into that and see whether that's a possibility.
I
think there is a forum, yes.
Yeah, I think there is.
And we will have a checklist for some of these ideas, at least, that will be available on the International Day of Action webpage, with lots of resources that you can look at. So when you go to sign up, be sure to look for the checklist as well.
Yeah, it'd be great to share the ideas from today as well, because you're collecting all of them in the chat, and there were some great ones that just flashed past. So get another chance to review all of those, because it is very much a community effort to bring everything together.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's the thing we really like is the international aspect of this. The fact that people from all over the world recognise this as a problem, and we're trying to do something about it.
Okay.
All right. So I think all that remains to say really is to thank everyone for joining us today. Been good to have so many people here. We are doing this webinar again in September. Well, maybe changed a bit, as all presentations are, but do go ahead and make the plans as early as possible, get the day blocked out, try and get the activities booked in, and try and get staff aware that they can mention academic integrity during their classes that week, because that's a really powerful way to get that whole campus message across. But I really think it's going to be a great day, potentially a great week, looking at contract cheating and what we can do about it with students this year. So from me, thank you for joining us, and I'll let Irene and Gretchen say some final words.
And thanks very much, everyone, for joining us from me as well. And have a good International Day of Action.
From me as well, thank you all for taking the time. Thank you to Thomas and to Irene for such great content, and be looking forward to the day itself, and also to receiving the follow-up email with the recording of this webinar. So thank you all, and we hope to talk with you soon.